Hello there, I am the writer, producer, and I do the voice acting for the Star Trek Voyager Season 8 podcast. Star Trek Reverie is my offshoot podcast where I want to informally talk Star Trek from the mindset of a writer and a fan. Please don't forget to check the links in the show notes for more information. So, Strange New Worlds, Episode 9, All Those Who Wander. The USS Enterprise crew comes face to face with their demons, and scary monsters too, when their landing party is stranded on a barren planet with a ravenous enemy. Directed by Christopher J. Byrne, written by Davy Perez. They kept it simple this time and only used one writer, Davy Perez, who also wrote Memento Mori with Beau DiMeo. Davy's work consists of various writing credits for Supernatural, a CW drama, a couple of shorts, and then some episodes of American Crime. But I'm underselling Davy's abilities because I haven't watched anything of what he's written other than what I've seen in Star Trek, and probably nothing else, hopefully, ever again. You know, I'm going to postulate that this episode exemplifies the difference between a science fiction writer and a writer being tasked with writing science fiction. I feel a sci-fi writer would at least want to play with some common tropes, subvert expectations, maybe force us to question our own preconceptions or of our own heroes. And such events can precipitate interesting character growth we can witness and learn from. In other words, we can sink our teeth into the meaning of the story, whereas a writer would cite their favourite science fiction movies in cool references and build a story around them with some jump scares and meaningless pseudo-intellectual deaths. This is the crux of what distinguishes Star Trek from New Trek. They are two entirely different beasts. No pun intended, again. What I watched in episode 9 was someone tried to cram in as many references to better science fiction stories as possible. Let's see. Number 1, desolate ship on planet. That's Alien. Number 2, human girl survivor. That's Aliens. Number 3, alien point of view vision. Any Predator or Aliens vs Predator movie. Number 4, new characters that get killed off in the same episode. Basically, any Star Trek away team mission actually. But more on this later. Number 5, characters making dumb choices. Alien Covenant at least. Number 6, self-sacrifice at the end of the story. Alien 3. Number 7, using oneself as bait. Alien 3. Number 8, fast-running killing machines down corridors. I won't say Alien 3, let's shake it up and go with Jurassic Park. Number 9, shouting, "Come on!" Alien 3. Number 10, crew members aren't paying attention to other characters convulsing and then they die because of it. Alien Covenant. Why is this episode so derivative and willing to waste our time? Don't get me wrong, this episode on a technical level looks great, but I just didn't get anything out of this episode except Spock needs to turn his anger on to attack a wall panel, and now said anger can't be turned off, and I guess we'll see the consequences of this in a later episode. Let's take a moment and realize why Aliens is such a good movie. You've got action with wisecracking heroes who make the necessary sacrifices to beat the bad guys, but it's also a direct commentary on the attitudes and failures stemming from the Vietnam War and hubristic thinking, and how corporate greed leads to destructive outcomes. Aliens is layered with subtext and meaning. I'm shocked none of the more allegorical and to me interesting stuff isn't being emulated. What stops Davy Perez from adding just a little bit of subtext? Then even where there is room for some subtext, it gets snuffed out. I'm talking about the scene where M'Benga is defending the found girl. Isn't it enough to let us join the dots ourselves and think, oh yeah, he lost his daughter, the one that he's been trying to save since episode 3, instead of him just saying, don't speak to my daughter like that, or words to that effect. Okay, in Aliens, Newt does shout mummy at the end, but it's Ripley's story, where she lost her daughter and doesn't tell anyone, and wins over Newt over the course of the movie. It signifies Newt's acceptance and Ripley's acceptance that they may have both lost family, but they came together to be stronger during a traumatic time of hardship and upset. While we're on the issue of subtext, how come I've already seen memes where George Kirk is pictured upset from this episode with the caption, "Game over, man!" And did anyone find it needless and almost a word-for-word conjuring from this scene when he berates Spock, like Cadet Kirk did when baiting J.J. Abrams' Spock in Star Trek 2009 after the Vulcan homeworld is destroyed? Main issues with Davy Perez just going for the visual references instead of reaching deeper, here are some smaller ones. Now that we know a little bit more about how the Gorn function as a warp-capable society, how do they function as a warp-capable society? At some stage of their life cycle, they become rational enough and intelligent enough to invent warp drive and fly spaceships. But to get there, they've got to breed enough Gorn in the first place, because any group of hatchlings instantly try to kill each other. What is the threshold where they don't? Because it seems like a waste of time and effort to infect so many hosts for one Gorn to survive. So if you produce 5 hatchlings from one host, 4 have to die, right? What happens if you have 50 hatchlings in one group, or 500 hatchlings in a group? Did they all get thrown off the top rope, WrestleMania style, whittled down to the one Gorn regardless? How do the Gorn gain in number? I just don't get it. I also don't understand how an immature Gorn can spit venom, and that itself already is a mechanism to grow more Gorn. Are we saying they don't even need to mature? Loads of thoughts on this alien and not enough time. And this leads me to my next point, where the showrunners haven't declared this as a reboot, and they're saying this is prime line? This is prime timeline, you know what I mean, canon, leading up to TOS. Shouldn't they just make a new alien race instead of turning a race we already are supposed to have sympathy for into something that's a threat now? Surely the Tholians would be better and a more interesting choice. Going off my knowledge of TOS, the Tholians were even less explored or seen in a positive way by the end of TOS. Though I do have to give Davy Perez the benefit of the doubt for this point here. Was there an attempt, and it's a pretty good attempt, to throw us off the scent as to who would die in this episode? Of course, Spock, Pike, and Uhura can't. If you haven't seen TOS, Sam Kirk can't also. So that leaves Lan, Hemmer, Lieutenant Duke, and I think Cadet Chia. That's 5. And I didn't think Hemmer or Lan would die, as they are in the main cast. Color me surprised when at the end of the episode, Lan is gone, and so is Hemmer. And they did my boy Hemmer dirty. His death was meaningless, and an overall shame. We barely knew him, and yet Hemmer was one of the nicest characters on the show, and possibly the most interesting, even with scant information about him. Yes, there was a small through-line with Uhura and Hemmer team-ups, but not enough to get me to believe that this is the inciting incident that will radically change Uhura so that she stays on the Enterprise. I'm not saying the death of a shipmate couldn't do that exactly. Their relationship just didn't have the weight attached to it yet where I could find it believable. But now on the plus side, maybe the extra screen time freed up will be given to Ortegas or Number 1. Though it was an easy week of shooting that week for them both, I bet. Guess which episode is getting a poor grade again? The difference being, however, compared to other episodes I've reviewed, I wanted to give this a range of scores. I wanted to look at this as an episode through various facets because I was being charitable. Nobody high up in Paramount Plus want to fess up to this show being a reboot. Throw a bone to the die-hard fans and admit it. General interest viewers aren't going to care anyway. And as someone said to me on Reddit, and I quote, I just want to enjoy new content. I also have to see this episode in the larger context of the Gorn inside Star Trek. And I know I said I didn't want to play with the canon from TOS to Strange New Worlds, but I can't help the fact Kirk defeating an adult Gorn with his bare hands is nothing short of amazing now. If anything, this episode elevates Kirk's power levels. But aside from that, there's no redeeming the Gorn unless the writers say it's a different species of Gorn, or they were pirate Gorn, alt-universe Gorn, or virus-infected Gorn, zombie Gorn, vegan Gorn, Twitter Gorn. Just something to set the inconsistencies aside. We're talking hand-waving to the degree it would match the end of Season 2 of Discovery, where the ship is classified, and now the show doesn't break canon. Oh yeah, so my score. It's got to be an E in terms of writing. The entire episode is full of references. The entire episode is full of cheap references, rip-offs, tropes, and dumb choices from the characters. But better than Episode 8 at least. There are some redeeming aspects. The effects and makeup are top-notch, along with the not-so-child-friendly amounts of gore. Surprisingly as well, Nurse Chapel sold the scene when she jumped onto the biobed with the force field activated. She genuinely looked scared. So because of that, I'll bump this episode up to a D. If I could rewrite this episode, I'd need to start again and go back to episode 4, Memento Mori. Create a new alien race. Truly free myself from the constraints of canon and inject some deeper meaning for the new alien race with which to challenge the crew with. Oh, you make it sound so simple when you put it like that, Jonathan.